Hi, and welcome back to PJ Maybe. Tonight we're going to actually look at Logan's Run, the movie, not the show. Logan's Run, 1978, spectacular. 1976. Logan's Run was quite a cultural phenomenon at the time. It won the best um, special effects at the time as well, and even the cast was slightly different from what it was originally envisioned. Same as a lot of movies, they had preferred cast members. But we'll look at that at the end. We'll give a brief synopsis of the actual movie. The movie Logan's Run it basically starts off with a title card telling you it's set in the 23rd century and it's under a dome city after um, overpopulation, wars, everything. All the survivors are gathered in a dome city and they live a life of pleasure until the age of 30. Then they have to join the carousel to get renewed. Renewed, is that reincarnation or is it just their life extended? It's never really explained in it. There's parts in it, it seems to be implying that renewed is reincarnation, as one of the Sandmen states, one in, one out. There's other aspects of it. It seems to be a case of renewed, as in they continue to live, but nobody has ever seen anyone older than 30. So there is an underground which try and bypass it. That's what the Sandman come in. They are there to seek out runners and terminate them. The two, pardon me, the two main Sandmen are Logan 5 and Francis 7. Logan 5 is Michael York's character, and Richard Jordan plays Francis 7. Francis 7 is more strict in his interpretation of the rules, whereas Logan 5 is more questioning. So, although he's a strict Sandman for terminating runners, he has got a more questioning attitude. And the computer system brings Logan in to do an undercover operation to go and seek out the 1,056 runners that have escaped to Sanctuary. His job is to pretend to be a runner and find Sanctuary and destroy it. And to do this, the computer resets his timer, so it looks like he's on his last day and he's due for carousel. So he's to run. So the people who run the underground for Sanctuary will help him. Enter Jessica, and she's played by Jenny Agutter. She actually has questions for Logan when she first meets him prior to the undercover operation. So he, and because of the questions she asked, he goes to her for assistance because he believes she's part of the Underground Railroad. And she introduces or tries to introduce him to the rest of the Underground, but they want to kill him. And even though he proves that he's actually on the run and he's not out to kill runners, it's even then it's left ambiguous, because when the computer's assigning him it, the computer tells him that all the number of runners who have escaped, he asked if any have been renewed, and the computer says no, which is implying nobody ever gets renewed, so they just die. And he asks, will he get his 4 years back once his assignment's over and done with, because his timer has been reset. He's still got 4 years of life before he has to go to carousel, and the computer effectively doesn't tell him, so sends him on his way. So it leaves it a bit ambiguous. Is he actually doing it for himself because of the circumstances put in and the doubts he's now raising, or is he doing it because he's been assigned to do it? Initially, when he meets up the people who thinks where he thinks sanctuary is located in the city, he alerts the rest of the Sandmen, and they come down and kill everyone. But because Jessica's there and Logan doesn't want Jessica killed, he tried to send her away. She wouldn't go away, so he ends up killing a couple of the Sandmen and running with her. So, in effect, to uncover the lie that nobody gets renewed at Carousel and they're all dying, what he does is he instigates the team who helps people run in Sanctuary. He instigates their effectively execution, but he never tells Jessica the rest of this, so it's basically left unsaid as if it wasn't his fault, which we know it was. Then, once they escape the city, they get to the outside via ice caves, which is run by an android or a robot called Box, who has been freezing anybody who's come through, because it used to freeze food for the city, but no food is around anymore. None of the plankton, fish, or anything like that. So it's been freezing anything coming through and classes it all as food. So you see rows of humans in the ice vats. So it's implying that all the runners prior to that have been captured by Box and frozen, so nobody escaped. Once they get by Box after a fight, they get outside and they look around, and Jessica doesn't like the outside world because it's cold, there's creepy crawlies, and it goes dark, and she doesn't like it. But eventually they come across a city which they think is Sanctuary. Turns around, it's Washington, and it's derelict because it's been left because there's been nobody in it. But they meet an old man, and it's Peter Ustinov's old man, who lives with a load of cats. And he goes a bit, he sounds as if he's going a bit crazy because he's only had cats to live off. So what they do is they realise that nobody gets renewed. So they want to go back to the city to let people know that you can grow old, you can live past 30, and they convince the old man to come with them. Francis turns up after chasing them all the way, and Francis and Logan fight, and then Francis gets killed by Logan. But there's a wee scene that it was always a case of they were still friends. He just effectively wanted Logan back to go through the ritual because he believed in it. So they eventually go back, and Logan and Jessica go into the city to try and stop Carousel, but they get arrested effectively and interrogated by the computer, who is so convinced that Sanctuary is real, it scans Logan's mind and asking him questions. And every time the question comes up about Sanctuary, he says it doesn't exist. The computer eventually starts breaking down and it starts blowing up. And when that starts going, the whole of the Dome City goes because it controls everything. And then there's a bit of a fight between Logan and the other Sandmen trying to actually control it. Logan shooting at the computer banks, destroying more and more. And effectively, it ends with everybody who's survived outside the city. And they meet the old man and they're around him because they've never seen anybody over 30. In effect, that's how it ends. Is it a good ending? Is it a bad ending? Does it tell us anything? The thing with the movie is the movie was an adaptation of a book. The original novel, The Colour of the Life Clock, had to be changed. In The Colour of the Life Clock, they only lived to 21. and because of the themes in it and trying to cast actors, they decided that it was more realistic if they changed that to 30, because it'd be easier to cast actors and for the roles. And there was a few sex scenes in it. There was a few nudity. I think they would have been a lot harder to make if they tried to stick with all the cast being under 21, because it could have raised a few eyebrows. But even though they raised it to the 30 as the final age, a couple of the actors were actually over 30 when they played it. Michael York, Richard Jordan, and I think Jenny Agutter were all over 30 when they were meant to play in a society. Nobody lived past 30. Just a wee silly thing that I noticed when I was doing my research for it. However, there was a couple of things I noticed about the movie. The movie is iconic, but is it a good movie? It's a good movie if you don't look into it too much, because to me it was not very well written. I think the adaptation of the book is done. It could have been a lot tighter because there was too many questions being asked. Like, for instance, why did the computer not actually just tell him that he would get his 4 years back? Why didn't the computer tell him that people had been renewed? I'm sure the computer could lie, but for some reason it didn't. Evening, MC. Thanks for joining us. There was aspects of the thing, like, for instance, why were the Sandmen called Sandmen? The book explains it, but the movie doesn't. The book, the enforcers of the 21 age limit were called, it wasn't the carousel they went to. They went to get put to sleep, as it were. Basically, they were in a drug-induced coma. They basically got an injection when they were given drugs to make them high, so they're happy when they die. So the enforcers were called deep sleep enforcers, hence the reason Sandman. We all know the Sandman is meant to, what is it, dream me a dream? It's basically to do with sleep. So the Sandman, in that sense, the names make sense. Here, because of Carousel, Sandman doesn't make sense, apart from the fact is they were just called Sandman. They didn't even use saying it was an analogy, because they weren't terminating people. Because there's a part where Jessica says, "You kill people," and he says, "I've never killed anyone. I terminate runners." So he didn't class it. Why didn't he say he put them to sleep? It would have at least gave a feed into the Sandman name. But the name Sandman didn't really make sense in that. And also when it showed you the Sandman, so when you see Logan and Francis chasing a runner, in effect, they're sadistic. They're shooting at him to make him run a wee bit faster, making jokes as they're going, "Run, runner," and shooting at him, shooting at his legs to make him run a different way, and then eventually they kill him. So in effect, they're tormenting him for no other reason than they can, and they seem to enjoy doing it. So it looks like the Sandmen are just sadistic because they're just tormenting people for fun and nothing else. And that's, I thought, was a negative for it, because it didn't make sense. These guys were meant to be the enforcers, the police force, or whatever, and they seem to be sadistic when they were actually doing their job. Also, there's a part in it where they go down to the cathedral where all the young cubs, basically it's kids that they can't control, are left to fend for themselves and run riot, and they're vicious. Yet at 15 they have to leave. So what happens to them when they leave? They've had no conditioning, and they just leave that place, because if they stay there, because nobody after 15 is allowed to stay there, they would get killed. So they leave to come into the modern the society, which is a society of people who are only out for pleasure. So how would they act? How would they learn to control these vicious urges? It didn't make sense, that aspect of it as well. Either they would be, it would have been better for me if they says the young cubs, they basically, the people roaming outside the wall are all the rejects, the young cubs, and they know fine well they don't last because of they're having to fend for themselves, and so they all die young. That would have made a bit more sense. But again, the movie didn't really go into why they were there, apart from the fact is they were uncontrollable and had violent urges, so they let them run free. And then what? Doesn't it tell you what happens? Logan, when he bumps into them and they're trying to attack him, he basically goes to one of them, you're 15, you're nearly 15, and they're going to drive you out, and then what? You're going to become a green. And it just made no sense, because how were they meant to fit into society if they couldn't fit into society as they were when they were kids who were getting brought up by the machines? It left a lot of questions, and I think it's because the writing needed to be tighter. If they had stuck with more with the book, and I can understand why they changed it with the book. The fact is they changed the age from 21 to 30. It's quite acceptable because, yes, they wanted to get a wider range of actors, but some of the scenes in it, there's no way on earth they could do it with younger actors, I think. The book, actually, the old man and Francis were one and the same person. Francis was 42, so an old man, and considering the age at that time was 21, nobody lived past. It doesn't seem as bad if it was 42 when he was 30, so only an extra 12 years. But because it's also double the age of the oldest person in the city, he's an old man. But accordingly, he used to get his face done, so he was the one that would help him. So although he was a Sandman and out to take me, anybody would help, he could help. He would help as the old man. But they decided that it would be too complex to try and put him under makeup to try and make him look different enough, or they had Peter Ustinov, and there was no way in there they're going to say no, we'll just have somebody else doing it. So there's no way in earth they could actually have Richard Jordan portraying a younger Peter Ustinov. So they changed it completely. So they separated the two characters. You had the Sandman and you had the old man, and they weren't one and the same. Which I thought, it's a better story for Francis. So yes, in this one, he's just a sadistic friend who's tried to do the right thing, whereas in the book, he's the one who's trying to help everyone. He's just misunderstood because he's also a Sandman. I suppose it's like during a lot of these things, it says somebody who's in a position who seems to enforce it is the one helping people out in the background. It's like Fahrenheit 451, where it was the fireman who liked to read, and he would, if he came across a book it wasn't obvious, he would just let it slide because he was happy with that, so he would help people. But if he was going to get caught, he would turn them in, and quite the thing. It's things like that, so it's very similar ways in that. And there's also another two people in this that are quite good. So apart from Michael York, Richard Jordan, Jenny Agutter, and Peter Ustinov, you have Farrah Fawcett Majors. She was then Farrah Fawcett, obviously. Michael York had actually seen her on a tennis court and said she was one of the most beautiful women. So he basically talked the producer into actually hiring her. While they were filming it, she married Lee Majors. So she's Farrah Fawcett Majors credited in it, but it's because she married Lee Majors afterwards. Then you've got Roscoe Lee Brown, who played Box. And accordingly, that was quite a dangerous one, because anytime that robot flipped over, couldn't get upright and stuff like that. And Roscoe Lee Brown is basically great as Box, but he's such a great character actor. He's been in so many different things. He could fit into anything. But some of the good aspects of the movie were the casting and the clothing. Jenny Agutter did another walkabout scene in this one, although it was split. In Walkabout, it's when she's swimming. In this one is when she goes into the circuit, because they're more free living, and there's also the swimming scene as well. So yes, yum. But the characters in this, they were very well cast. I don't think there was even one. The Farrah Fawcett Major's Holly character was a bit ditzy, but I think she was meant to be ditzy. Yet the Doctor character in it as well was, I think it was the producer's son, or the director's son. So, but he was an actor on his own right, and it was just so happened that he got a part in a film where his dad was the director, because he's done other stuff and his dad's directed him in that as well. But they've never worked in any other movies together, although one's an actor and one's a director, so it's not as if it was plagiarism. So with Roscoe Brown and Farrah Fawcett rounding up the cast, the casting was well done. There wasn't any weak cast. I think the problem was some of the speeches were a wee bit forced, and it felt forced just for the simple fact is they seemed to be throwing that information out too much. They were just, here's a speech, let's do the speech. And it just seemed out of place, because it just seemed a case of you need to actually tell these people. So it's standing up and shouting out, and people just ignoring them and walking away. And then Jenny Agutter joins in and does it again. And yeah, Lee Majors, I've actually got a $6 million Man, and I'm going to start watching that very soon. So I've got all 6 seasons. I was expecting them on Friday, and they turned up along with Total Recall 2070. So I've got those 2 box sets to watch. So that's going to be next. Anyway, the movie, apart from anything else, there's some good extras in the movie. There's the commentary by Michael York and the director and the costume designer. There's some commentary on it talking about how they made the movie, what decisions they made, why they decided on the costume. There's also a vintage featurette, a look into the 23rd century, which is actually not too bad. It's actually talking about the city and things like that. And then there's a theatrical trailer on it. So for extras, the DVD is actually really good. Logan's Run, the sets were quite unusual as well. The set for the city, under no circumstances you could think that looks like a city. It looked like a model of a city, but it's a model that's been used in numerous things. The set miniatures were used as the city in Ice Pirates in 1984. It was also used as a backdrop in Star Trek Tapestry, I think it was Star Trek Next Generation. And it was also used in another thing. Oh, isn't that terrible when you can't remember what the third thing it was used for? So, Morton Mindy, that's what it was. It was used in Morton Mindy in the episode where the honeymoon. So, Morton Mindy, Star Trek Next Generation, and Ice Pirates, the cityscape was used for. So, let's see. New mic setup, new mouse setup, and everything. Excellent. I didn't actually remember much about the show anymore, but I haven't seen $6 Million Man since I was a nipper. Well, I used to have the eagle eye where you could look through his eye and you could press the lever and his arm would come up. So I had Lee Majors, Steve Austin. So I did when I was a kid. So I did like it. I did enjoy it, and I decided to get the DVD box set, and I'm going to do a review of that. But I don't know if I'm going to wait until after I finish Red Dwarf, or I'm going to do it in a Saturday stream and actually just have people on and we'll just sit and talk about it. So maybe when we're doing it, MC, you can join us and we can all talk about it. Different experiences. But back to Logan's Run. Logan's Run spawned a TV show. None of the original cast starred in it, but it ran for 14 episodes, only 14. I actually thought it was okay. Wasn't the greatest, but as a continuation of the movie, I thought it was actually not too bad. They introduced another character, Rem. Was it Rem? Was the android? So, and it was just going around the earth, going around the countryside, getting chased by Sandmen. Anyway, a couple other things that I found out about this one, which would have changed how I thought about it. Obviously, Michael York and Jenny Agutter weren't the first choices for this movie. The first choices were John Voight and Lindsay Wagner. Now, would I have liked to see Lindsay Wagner in the Jessica role? Yes. Would we have seen the Jessica role portrayed the same way? Same clothing style? Nope. Can't see it. Jenny Agutter obviously came off of The Railway Children, but she'd done Walkabout, and there's been a few other movies she's done where clothing seemed to have been optional, shall we say. But the fact that they would have had Lindsay Wagner in this and Farrah Fawcett, but then again, if Michael York wasn't in it, would have had Farrah Fawcett because he was the one that suggested. So you'd have had Bionic Woman and Steve Austin's wife. Would have been funny. It would have been a nice wee glitch out that, because you had Lee Majors' wife, Farrah Fawcett, and you would have had Lindsay Wagner starring in the same show. But they would have been in the same show in this one as well. But also the role of the old man, they first offered it to James Cagney. Can you imagine James Cagney in that role? Peter Ustinov played it so well as he's losing it a wee bit. I think every time you'd have seen James Cagney, you would have expected something like with him, more of an old criminal, you do it, and coming out with him. But it's only because he's played so many roles. But then again, he played Yankee Doodle Dandy. He's a musician. He sang, he danced, as well as played the gangster. So you knew you could actually have got a wide range. And it just goes to show the type of people. And he had actually turned it down. And even Francis, originally it was to be played by William Devon, but he had to pull out at the last minute. So the four main characters in it would have been completely different. And how would that have changed it? James Cagney playing the old man, I think probably would have been just as good, because Peter Ustinov and James Cagney, the two of them are so versatile. I think the two of them could have played that easily. Obviously, we've seen it with Peter Ustinov, but we can't imagine, or we can imagine it with James Cagney. But it's like a lot of things. Once you've seen somebody in a role, can you imagine anybody else in the role? Not really. Once you've seen Jenny Agutter role, can you imagine anybody else in that role? Lindsay Wagner? Yes. But Jenny Agutter? No, I think it was perfectly cast. So it was. Evening, Wendy. And Wendology. I keep on calling you Wendy. I know I should actually stick to our names. Wendology _ So hi. Don't worry about missing the live stream. It's basically we're all busy tonight. I'm actually just doing a short stream. It's basically we've got a lot on this weekend, and that's why I plans for next week. I'm planning to do a Let's Talk Geek and actually just get a load of people and just nothing set in stone. Just sit and gab movies and TV shows. Obviously, there's a load of guys that are groups and they talk comics, they talk current stuff. I just want to talk old classic TV and movies. So I'm thinking next week, try and get a panel together just to talk general movies. How does that sound? Drop me a DM, leave a comment. You want to join? I'm up for that. That's what my plans are for going forward on a Saturday night. And I know a Saturday night's a pain. The reason I changed to a Saturday is because I want to watch a load of the guys that are on a Sunday. Hence the reason why when I'm streaming, I can't watch them. So I changed it to a Saturday, which is not the greatest day because if we're ever going out, we're always out on a Saturday night. But bummer. The way I look at it is we want to actually sit down, gab to people about everything. I want to talk about the $6 Million Man. I want to talk about Ice Pirates, which I loved, which, yes, I know a lot of people. I want to talk about Black Hole. I want to talk about Bionic Woman. I want to talk about Alf. I want to talk about Morton Mindy. I want to talk about all these classic old TV shows and movies. That's what I want to talk about, and I want to do it this Saturday. Anybody want to join us? Leave a comment. Anyway, Logan's Run. Good movie, maybe. Bad movie, not really. Is it a mediocre? Is it a good classic movie? Yes. There's a lot good positives in this. However, is it a great movie? Not to do with the fact is it's a iconic movie. Because you get some iconic movies that they're iconic because of the geek culture. Basically, they're so often quoted, or there's certain parts of it that we all remember. Logan's Run is one of those ones. There's certain parts of it we all remember. Carousel is the most iconic aspect of it. The Sandman. Oh, there's another one. See when they were actually getting script and getting the costumes done. They had obviously models coming on modeling the costumes. Do you know who one of the models were for the Sandman outfit? David Hasselhoff. I found that out. David Hasselhoff was one of the models. As they were, you just see them all coming in, giving the wee twirl with the wee green outfits, and then the Sandman comes in, and it's David Hasselhoff on stage. It's just thingy. But the guns, the Sandman outfit, I would love to have done a cosplay as a Sandman. Obviously, I would have had to be a lot younger, but I was thinking of doing an old Logan, this age, dressed as a Sandman with the gun, and just coming in, even with a stick, just saying, "See, I told you could live past 30." But it's something I would love to do. But the gun is so iconic. It is one of those ones, although the actors hated working with it because it used propane to give the shots look, and accordingly that used to go off as often as when they press the button and then nothing happened. But there'd be times when it'd be in the holster and it would go off. It was just unreliable and they hated working with them. It's the same as Jenny Agutter. She says she got dead embarrassed with her outfits, and that's why she doesn't do Comic Cons. I think she's done one or two, and a lot of young females come up dressed in the wee skimpy green outfit she was wearing, and she says she feels embarrassed by that. Not embarrassed for them, it's just the fact that she remembers it, she felt embarrassed walking about with these barely on outfits. And although, yes, the people that are coming out of Comic Cons aren't dressed the same way, she just gets embarrassed because how she felt at the time. But I would love, one of the things I would love, there's a couple of things I would love to get, which is too expensive for me, that's the only reason I'm not getting it. I would love to have on my wall, I would love to have certain guns from certain franchises. And the Logan's Pistol is one at the top of my list. I would like to have ECG from Babylon 5. I would like to have a pulse rifle from Alien. I want to have the one from Space 1999, the U-shaped one with a communicator. There's things like that I want, but truthfully, I could purchase the models, but I can't build them. So effectively, I would have to purchase pre-built ones, and you're talking about minimum price for these things are in the hundreds of pounds. And unfortunately, I can't afford that. I've spent too much long saving up for my new computer, but I want to get hold of all these weapons, and the Sandman's gun is definitely top of my list. It is just an iconic weapon. However, even with all these iconic geek points, the movie has got too many loopholes. They start a story and then they sort of let it run. Like, for instance, what happens to people when they hit carousel? We know that they get killed, but is it they're telling the populace that they're getting renewed, but they don't even explain what renewed is. Is renewed mean that when one person, people die, somebody's born, and it's a renewal that way? So that's reincarnation. So when you float up and explode, you're being reincarnated. Or is it renewal? You live to be 31. They don't explain what people think is happening. They just talk about it, but they don't explain what renewal is. So you get two people talking about it, like Francis talks about it, one in, one out. So he's talking about reincarnation. So when you go through carousel, you die and a baby's born, and you're born in that soul of the baby. So within him, you could understand what he's thinking. However, there is also they're saying, have you ever met someone who's been renewed? So does that mean that people don't die, they live on after 30? Considering they say you've never met anybody, implies not. So does that mean just we know everybody dies and it's just a population control mechanism, which has been used in so many other things? Soylent Green, a lot of Twilight Zone stuff, even a Star Trek one, Half a Life, I think it was called. Star Trek Next Generation, that was, where when people turn 60, they're expected to commit suicide. And if they don't, they're classed in, they're hounded and classed as cowards and ridiculed and stuff like that. That was Star Trek one. So there's always been ones about how use population control, but it doesn't explain what the people think happens, because it leaves it wide open. They don't explain, do the people think you're reborn into a baby? So you have to do it. So if you get terminated by a Sandman, you're not reborn, so you're dead. Whereas they also imply that if nobody's been reborn, have you ever seen anybody that's been renewed? I think it's renewed. I keep on saying reborn, but renewed. And they say no. But they've heard about it. If they'd heard about it, then they would be older people. That's the way it's implying. So it's what is it, that or that? And it doesn't answer that question within the story. So you don't know what people think. If they had somebody talking about, when they're talking about carousel and not wanting to die or stuff like that, then you could have actually had that says, well, if you don't, then you're not reborn. Then you would explain they think it's reincarnation. So then if somebody doesn't, then that means they end and they think their soul doesn't get reborn. That would at least make sense in the prospect of the renewal. Or is it they expect people, have you ever met anybody over 30 because they've been renewed? They never mention that at all. It's left ambiguous, and I don't like the ambiguity of it. It's not that it's left ambiguous for us, the viewer, because us, the viewer, know that they die. However, within the movie, the people don't seem to they don't explain to the people, or the people don't explain to you what they understand renewal is, and they give something it means. They think this and then they think that. It's two different ideas of what they are, and that annoys me. Also, it's a wee niggly thing that they showed the Sandmen, who are meant to be thingy, as sadistic, but they're meant to be great guys, and so they're authoritarian, but they still go through the same. It's no like when their time comes, they get a buy to live on or whatever. They're basically expected to do the same as everything else, but they're shown as being sadistic. The way they're actually treating the runners, shooting at their feet to make them run further, going run, runner, and it just makes them look sadistic. And why are they sadistic? For fun. It's nothing else. It's not a case of they've bought into the system that if they do what the system tells them, they get a reward. They can live longer, but no, they still expect themselves to be it, and they're so high that a Sandman's never been a runner until Logan. But why would the computer system not tell somebody else, like his partner, that don't shoot him because we need him to do that? The fact that the computer just tells him not to tell anybody else. If Francis had caught him up straight away, he could have shot him, and that would have been over and done with. Things like that, from outside the movie, when we're looking in, it makes zero sense. And that's the parts I don't like. And that's where I think Logan's run fails. I think it fails just on the ambiguity it leaves within the story. Saying that, I still love it. I still enjoy watching it. I've watched it numerous times. I've watched the commentary, I've watched the featurette. I even enjoy the TV show. But just because I enjoy something doesn't mean I can't stop seeing things. Yeah, but with Logan's Run and the heading on, used to have the toy space gun. See, I would love to have that. The nearest I've got is the Eagle. You can just see it there. Where is it? There. That's the Eagle. But I don't have the gun, unfortunately for me. But I would love to have the gun and the communicator as well. It's the same as I've got a Lawgiver. That's a Mark 1 Lawgiver from Judge Dredd. That's the only one. I've got the Mark 1 Lawgiver, and I've got a day stick, and I've got the badge, and I've got the belt buckle, and I've got the helmet. That is the start, and it's a case of those 5 things. Well, nearly £500 just for 5. Actually, nearly £600 for 5 things. And if I want to do the same with the Space 1999 stuff, that's a couple of £100 just for the gun and the communicator. Then I want to do the same for Babylon 5. So I want the communicator, I want the ECG, or ECG, BCG. I can't remember. It's my head's going. It's overheating at the moment. However, I want them as well, and I just don't have the cash. And anytime I do, things like this pop up, and they're cheaper, so I end up buying them. So I could have either got those 2, or else I could have actually still been saving up towards the gun for the Space 1999. And guess what I wanted? I wanted them both, so I ended up getting the cheaper option. Yes, the good old Dinky Eagle. They're doing a sequel today with children. Well, how's about this? Although it's been in production hell for a number of years, they are rebooting that. So they are rebooting that. No, they are. They'd actually wanted to do it years ago, and they wanted to redo it when Leonardo DiCaprio was at his height. That way, they could have used it more towards the book with the 21-year-olds, because they would have had people who looked younger. However, the fact that they're talking about redoing it now, can you imagine what it'd be like? Do you realise Logan's Run? There was a couple of things they would never do in it. Believe it or not, all the Sandmen were men. There was not one female in authority. There was not one person ethnic minority in it at all. The whole cast was white because it's meant to have been at the time. But saying that, for the time when it was filmed, it was during the height of the 60s, 70s free love. The bit with what's it? Not the carousel. The bit where they offer themselves for love, and it's free love. You see the guy turning up, and Michael York just goes, "Yeah," as if to say, "No, just now." So it passes on, and then he picks Jenny Agatha, and then she says she's no interest. He says, "Oh, you into women? Oh well, that's." Basically, it didn't actually. It portrayed that people could have any type of lover, no issues. And considering when that was made, that was quite ballsy to do because it could have actually been hit with a censorship based on the fact as they were promoting it. Because they were hit with censorship when they went with the drug scene, the bit where Francis comes in and throws up the drug. There was a bit they had to cut out where they went into the mall and they went to the what was it called? The vaporium or something like that. And it was basically all drugs they were selling. And they had to cut that out because they said, no, you are not allowed to actually show drugs being sold as part and parcel of every day. And considering they were trying to stop that, they kept trying to put kibosh on the nude scenes. They were quite happy that the possibility of people being gay was not an issue. It was just no, not today. I'm okay, thank you. Which at the time was really good, but there was no sand. All the Sandmen were men, so all the people in authority were men. And yes, the computer had a female voice, and the computer was in charge. But in effect, what they're going to do? Making it Sandmen being men and women. So why would they call them Sandmen? They would have to give them their proper title. Sandman is just because there was of the sleeper. The Sandman name didn't work based on the fact the book, the Sandman name worked, but in the movie it didn't. Because why were they called Sandman in the movie? It was never explained why. It's like used to read a comic and it was called Leos. And one of the first episodes, I think it was all about, it was a very early one before Judge Dredd, I think it was. And these guys were basically police, but they were called law enforcement officers, Leos for short. So you already knew that Leos, when they were talking about Leos, they were talking about the law enforcement officers, because that's what they were called. They weren't called police, they weren't called judges, they weren't called anything else. They were called law enforcement officers, or the Leos. In this one, they don't explain why the Sandmen are called Sandmen, because it makes zero sense. In the book, when they were deep sleep enforcers, because the people were put to sleep, not in the carousel, then Sandmen had a tie-in because of the sleep. So that's why they were nicknamed Sandmen, because they helped you go to sleep. So if it gets remade, there's going to be one or two things. They're going to oversaturate it with nudity and sex, which no, or they're going to completely cut it out and everybody will be wearing polo necks up to the air, and it's going to be a case of no. It was to show how it was a pleasure society. So even the bits where they go into the place and they were having the slow motion orgy, the lights were dark enough that you knew what was happening, and that was it. Even when they went into the ice caves, you see all the people nude. Which funny thing was that was actually filmed during a heatwave. And so the boxes, the extras had to get spray painted white, and then in between takes they could rest, drink water. But when a take come, they had to stand for minutes at an end without moving. So even their breathing, they had to breathe very slowly, so it didn't look as if their stomach or their chest was going. So, but you can imagine those scenes, they would be CGI'd, fair enough, or something like that. So they wouldn't have to worry about extras and stuff like that. But there was parts of that makes it iconic. There's parts of it you can see why they changed it. However, I don't want to see a remake of it based on the current circumstances and what they've done with remakes. You look at Ghostbusters remake, rubbish. You look at any remakes really. I'm trying to think of a remake which was good recently. I think there's only been 2 remakes I've liked. Was Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which was the 78 one, not the more recent one. I thought that stands alone on its own, but it also can be seen as a continuation of the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 1956, and the Charlie's Angels, the first Charlie's Angels movie. I thought was quite a good remake because they still had Forsyth. What's his name? I can't remember his name. Who played Charlie? Still his voice. They had the 3 angels, and then you had Bosley. So you had the 5 main characters. Fair enough, one of them was just the voice of, but you had the 5 main characters, and all they did was updated it. They kept the premise the same, and that sort of worked. Movie 2 onwards, I thought was a load of rubbish. But so I can't think of a movie nowadays which is a remake which has been anywhere near as good as the original. Anybody can think of one? Jane Carpenter's The Thing. But when was that? That's not a new thing. It's a good remake, but horrors are not my remake. So I remember the original Thing. I loved the original. The John Carpenter one, didn't really care about it. Yes, the effects were really good, but I don't like horrors as much, whereas the original Thing is classic campy horror. I didn't see it as a horror, it was more as a psychological one. Like, for instance, when they're all standing around trying to find out what the shape of the ship was and they realise it's a flying saucer. I liked the original Thing, but the John Carpenter one, I've seen it once and it didn't even leave an impression on me. But when was that made? I can't remember when John Carpenter's was made. Same again, you're saying the Dawn of the Dead, the remake of Dawn of the Dead. The only zombie ones I watch, believe it or not, are Bruce Campbell's. So 1982, the remake was made of that. It's a classic. That's what I'm saying. I'm talking about in the last 15 years. When can you think of a decent movie in the last 15 years it's been remade anywhere near as good? So John Carpenter's The Thing, 1982. That's nearly 30 years ago. Nearly 40 years. So it's the same as like the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which was 78. And to me, that was almost as good. The Evil Dead TV show, you mean? That was a continuation based on Bruce Campbell being there. The Evil Dead. See, the only ones I actually like are basically the Bruce Campbell 3, or 4 if you include Bubba Hotep and the TV show, and Shaun of the Dead. That is the only zombie movies I've actually enjoyed. Any other zombie movies, I don't see the point in. The remake. What remake? Evil Dead. Well, I've not seen the remake, I must admit. It's because I'm not a big horror fan. I like the old classics, so I can watch an old Frankenstein movie or an old Dracula movie. But The Evil Dead, an updated zombie movie, I don't know. It's just not my thing. But then again, just because it's not my thing doesn't mean it's no good. It just means that I can't comment on it. But I do normally I don't like remakes, and I can honestly admit there's 2 remakes I've enjoyed, but they've not been in the last 15 years. Anything I've seen in the last 15 years that they've tried to remake something, just basically they say they're remaking it, but what they do is they use the title, they use the character names, and that's it. They change absolutely everything else about it. And to me, that's not a remake. That's just a rehash. Basically, let's use the names of the characters to get people to come and watch it. We'll use the same name to get people to come and watch it, but we'll change everything else about it. So that's why I don't like remakes. But I still can say the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, whereas I love the original, that was really good. And Charlie's Angels, the first one, was good. And I am aware that the John Carpenter's The Thing was good. It's not my type of movie, but I've seen enough people and I know enough people who enjoyed it and thought it was better than the original. And if people can think it was better than the original based on the fact it was a really good story with good effects and everything, you can't actually complain about that. And that's the thing. We definitely need to get together and chat about these things. See, actually doing it like this, sometimes it's nose thingy. But next Saturday, I'm going to try and get a panel together so we can sit down and we can gab movies and TVs. Not as bothered about comics. I've got a load of comics there. I enjoy reading my comics, my books, and everything. But I just want to talk movies and TV. Things like $6 Million Man, Blake 7, The Thing. Somebody can convince me to watch it again, or things like that. It's classic stuff. As long as it's classic, am I bothered about watching anything that's been made in the last 10 years? No. There's been very few things I've watched recently. I think the most recent thing I've watched was Resident Alien. And that's only because Alan Turyk's in it, and I loved him in Tucker and Dale v Evil. Now, there's a good movie. But I digress. Blake 7. Logan's Run. A good and entertaining movie. Thought-provoking movie. It conjures up too many negative thoughts for me. It is a great film, but there's too many unknowns in it. So I think what let the film down wasn't the cast, wasn't the scenery, wasn't the setup, wasn't the basic story. It was the screenplay. They left too many things unanswered. So as a story, mediocre. As a movie and entertainment, it's definitely one of my favourites. It is just, and it's not just because of Jenny Agutter, honest. It is a good movie in that respect. If it entertains you, doesn't matter if it's a mediocre story. If it's something you can go back to and rewatch, does it matter if it's a mediocre story? No. Good film for a watch, but watch it without thinking about what's actually happening on screen. Just sit, switch off, and enjoy. That's my recommendations for this. Good, fun movie. As long as you don't, if you're one that actually listens to the story and what's happening, and things can throw you out of a story because they don't make sense, definitely not a great story in that respect. You can sit, switch off, just enjoy what's in front of you. Logan's Run's one's for you. Definitely. It's got some great actors in it, and it's got some great scenery. Even though the models you can see, that's a model, they look fantastic. the size of some of those models they built, it was one of the biggest model sets ever built for a movie at that time. And some of the buildings, when you see them, they built them in perspective. So some of them like 4 foot tall, and then the ones that are further away, which are meant to be as tall, are like 2 foot tall, but they're made them look smaller. It's like the Disney effect. When you look at the castle looks bigger because what they've done is they've got the wall, and inside they've scaled everything down so it looks as if it's further away, so it makes the building look bigger. That's what they did with this. So they had 2 buildings meant to be the same size, but because one's meant to be miles away, they made that one smaller to give you perspective, so it looks as if that the place is larger. And that, to me, even those things, I find them fascinating. But I used to love Thunderbirds and stuff like that, Stingray and stuff like that. So seeing model sets, stuff like that, looks fantastic. So if you liked what you see, give it a thumbs up. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe. I'm almost hitting 60. I'm aiming for 100, but I'm almost hitting 60, and I'm not talking about my age this time. Leave a comment. Anything you want us to discuss, look at for next week, leave a comment in the video. And remember, I'm not old, I'm classic. Thank you for joining me, MC Indology, and PJ Maybe out. I should have actually went